So we're going to be building this little timer component at the bottom here today. We're going to start with building out the UI, and then we're going to create a Mobx store that's going to increment the timer and keep the state for it. Now the purpose of this timer is after you complete an exercise, you want to wait like 5 minutes or so or 3 minutes and then do the exercise again. So this timer is going to keep track of that time for you. And as you proceed, it's going to tell you how much time you have left before you need to do the exercise again. So let's go ahead and start off with the UI of this. So the first thing is it's going to be at the very bottom, and we're going to start on that now. So the bottom, we're going to create a new UI component here. I'm going to call this workout timer.tsx, and I'm going to say React hook and use my snippet, and then workout timer. Now we're going to render a view, and you'll notice the view was at the very bottom of the screen. So the way that we get something at the very bottom of the screen is we're going to be using absolute positioning. So I'm going to say container style here, and I'm going to say position absolute, and then I'm going to say the bottom 0, and I'm going to say left of 0. That way it's starting at the very leftmost and at the very bottommost. Next, I'm going to give it a height of, let's say, 50 and a width of 100%. Then I'm going to set a background color for it. And then for this, I'm just going to go back to our color wheel and pick one of the colors. Let's go ahead and pick the green and paste that in. And so I'm going to say styles.container. And then inside of here, I'm just going to say text, and I'm going to say hello for now. And we're just going to see if this renders a box at the very bottom of the screen. So we'll import this, and not view base, view, and we'll give this a save. And then I'm going to just come over here to the current workout and render this workout timer at the bottom. So give that a save. Then let's come back to our React application, create the workout, and you'll notice now we have a box at the very bottom and it says hello in it. So that's kind of how we're going to position the box, and we had to give it a height because we don't really have much content in this, but I guess we could have done it based off of the content too, but I'm just going to do a static height, I think. All right, so the next thing is I'm not going to worry about the text in the middle. I'm just going to have the timer on the left and then X on the right. So this is going to be the text on the left, and then this is going to be the X on the right. So let's style each one of these. I'm going to start with the X. The X, I'm going to again just pick a color from our color picker, and I'll just go with this one. And then the font size, I'm going to say as like 20. We'll see if that's too big. And then this is going to be the actual time text, and this is going to be the color, I'll say, is white, and the font size a little bit smaller, maybe 18. Right now I'm just calling it hello, but we're going to be replacing that in a little bit. So styles.timetext, and then styles.x. And then I want space to be between these guys again, so in my container I'm going to say flex, actually justify content space between, and that should push them to the edges. All right, so let's take a look at it, create the workout. It looks like I need to have them in a row, so I'm going to say flex direction row. That way they align. And now we have them on opposite sides. Cool. So next thing is I want to add basically some spacing, some padding around it, and basically center them. So I'm going to say align items center. And then I'm just going to add like a padding of 10 or something, and we'll give that a save. All right, and we'll see what that looks like. Good. And actually, I don't want to add a padding because one other thing that we're going to add is kind of like a loading indicator at the top. That's not something you can see in the screenshot, but it's in the app itself. Is basically when the timer starts, there's a little line that kind of goes across. So we're going to be building that. I guess we'll build that at the end when we have the state in there. So this is basically going to be the time, and then we have this little X. I want the X to be quite a bit bigger, I think, maybe like 30, so it's easy to click on. And I guess we want a little bit more space, I guess padding on the side of that as well. And I also want to make it touchable opacity like that. And then I'm going to say on press. And then here we're just going to say a prop that we're going to take in here. So on X press, push, and this is just going to be a function, and that's the function definition. So it takes no parameters and then returns void, so nothing. On X press, I'll pass that in there. And so when we render it over here, we're going to have to use that on X press. And for now, I'm just going to do nothing when the X is pressed. So now it should be clickable. So sweet. And again, let's add a little bit more. I'm going to say padding is like 30. And I'm just going to say padding on the left and the right sides. So that should be padding horizontal. Because we're already centering it. All right, so cool. So I'm pretty happy with this right now. We can click on this. The next thing is we want to make this interactive. By interactive, I mean this should be incrementing up as we kind of like a timer approach. So to do this, we're going to create a new store to keep track of this. So I'm going to say workout timer store.ts. Export class workout timer store. And now what are we going to actually put inside of this, right? So I was looking at this one article and I liked their approach. They were basically building a stopwatch with Mobx. And so that's going to be very similar to what we're doing. So we're going to take a few cues for how they kind of set up theirs. So what they do is they have, instead of, for example, creating the number of seconds that the timer has been running for, basically you have a date the timer started off, and then you do a difference between the start and the current date, which we'll see in a second. So we're going to create an observable here, and this is going to be basically the start time. And so start time, I'm going to just say is new date, but we're going to talk about that in a second, what we're going to do instead. And so basically what we want to do is also we want to know whether the timer is running. So you create an is running variable, and this is going to be false by default. The other thing is I want to know the amount of seconds that have basically passed. So for example, let's say we started at a current date start at a current or some time, and then we want to compare the start time versus the current time and compute the difference in seconds. So that's what this is going to store right here. So the next thing is we basically need to start the timer, and we need to basically end the timer. And then in the middle, we're going to have this thing called measure, which basically is going to be running they did it every 10 milliseconds, I believe. We're going to run it every second, and basically it's going to compute the difference. But you'll see what this will make more sense in a second. And I'll link this article below if you want to check it out, because it was pretty good. So we're going to create an action. We haven't really used actions in Mobx before, but basically they're just a function that change some of the variables or the fields in the store. So we're going to do this start timer, and I'm not going to worry about this check right here. We don't really have that problem. Actually, in our particular application, we actually don't want it to function like that anyway. All right, so what they use for the start time is they're using moment, and so we're going to be using a slightly different library for that. It's called day.js, so we're going to install that, and it doesn't really matter what version you install that. Yarn add. So just go ahead and do that. And basically what day.js is a moment, but it's not as large. I believe it matches most of the APIs, if not all of them, but it just does not have a giant bundle size. And we don't really need all the features of moment anyway. We just need the ones that day.js supports. Really, we're only using one function of it, which we'll see in a second. So when we start the timer, we're basically going to say we're currently running. So we set that to true, and then we get the current time. And then we're just going to import day.js here. There we go. And then we're going to call this timer. And then instead of new date here, we'll make it a day.js as the default. All right, so let's do the measure action. Oops, it should be measure. Actually, I can just copy their measure. We're going to basically do that. All right. So their measure, what they do is if it's currently, so if you turn this variable off, measure is going to stop, because basically what it does is it recursively calls itself. So as soon as we say false, it's going to stop running. So that's what that does. What it does next is it sets the current difference in time. So that's going to be the seconds variable for us, since we don't really care about milliseconds. And then lastly, it's going to do set timeout. And so what set timeout does is after this many milliseconds, it's going to call this function. And so you notice it's calling itself. So it's recursively calling itself, waiting 10 milliseconds. For us, we just care about seconds, so we're going to do that. And then this, I'm going to call this seconds, and we're going to say dayjs.diff. And then we just have to say the unit that we want back, in this case, second. So what's going to happen is dayjs creates a date object in the current time. So it's going to say the current time difference to when we started, and that's going to be in seconds. All right, so we have start timer. The last thing we really need is just to end the timer. And to end the timer, it's very simple. All we do is we set is running to false, and then that stops it from basically continuing to measure itself over and over again. And by the way, whenever a measure gets called, basically we're going to be able to see the new value of seconds, and that's going to re-render our application. So that's how that's going to work. And then we basically want to just add a helper here, which I'm calling display. And it's similar to what they did. And we're going to say computed, and this is going to be display. And so we haven't done a computed property either. So a computed property is basically it uses some of the fields and it generates a new field based off of it. So for example, we're basically going to take the current difference in seconds. So there might be 30 seconds difference, and we're just going to format that into a string. So we're going to say, and also this is going to be a variable that we want to, actually I'll show you guys the difference before. I'm going to add the get keyword, but I'll show you what the difference is with including it and not including that is. So here I want to display the number of minutes. So I'm going to say this.seconds divided by 60, and then I'm just going to say math.floor on that. And I guess I can say const minutes to be super clear. And then the number of seconds, right, is going to be this.seconds mod. And then all I want to do is I may want to pad this with a 0 as well. But I guess why don't I show you guys what this looks like first. Minutes colon seconds. All right. And now if we go back over to our current workout, I want to pass to our workout timer the current time. So we're going to say current time. And we're going to say this, or sorry, not this. We just need to access our root store. And we'll say root store dot. And now we want to access the workout timer store. So we need to add that to our root store. So let's go to that. And we're going to say workout timer. And I'm not going to worry about passing this in because we're not going to need it. So now we can access that over here. And we're going to say dot display. And we'll come back over here and we're going to say current time is a string. And so instead of rendering hello here, we're going to render current time. And if I come back over to this, you'll notice I'm calling display like a regular function. Now, if I want this to be more of a property that's constantly changing instead of calling it as a function, I can do that. And that is what that get keyword does. So when I say get, basically it's going to call the function to get the property. And now we can use it as just a regular property and we can access the field like that. So pretty cool. So let's just see if we see stuff and we don't get any errors. Oh, let's rewatch. Now you'll notice we're not actually starting the timer, so that should we shouldn't see it ticking. But if we right here on the workout card, when we press on a workout, I guess we'll do it at the bottom here. Now I guess let's just do it at the top. I keep wanting to say this, but we're just going to say root store dot timer dot is running, or sorry, we don't call it is running, we say start timer. And that's just going to call our action to kick things off. All right, so we'll come over here. So we can see it's zeros. We can see our X here. And if I press this, you'll notice it's incrementing every second now. So pretty neat. So let's take this a step further. One thing is we may want to pad this with a 0 so it just looks a little bit nicer. So I guess we go to our workout or store, and we can just make a simple utility function. And we're just going to say const pad 0. And this is just going to take a number, and it's going to say if number is greater than 10 or equal to 10, we'll just return it. Otherwise, we're going to return it with a 0 in front. So give that a save, and then we can wrap these. Pad 0. And now I think we should see 0, 0. Click on this, and it increments nicely. Cool. The other thing is I want to close the timer when I click on the X. And that should really reset the timer as well. So if we come back to the current workout and the on press here, we're just going to say root store.workout timer, and we're going to say stop, or end timer, I guess is what I called it. We'll pass that in. So now we'll let tick 1, 2, 3 or whatever. Click the X, and oh, it's not, cannot add property is running, object is not extensible. Oh, what happened to this? Workout timer, what did I do? This dot is running is now false. I wonder if it's because I didn't call it in a lambda. If I do that, I wonder if it works. Let's see. So start it, increment, do that. Yep, and it looks like, I guess I'm not resetting the seconds to 0, so that would be a good thing to do. But that stopped it. I'm actually not sure why I need to do a lambda with this. Probably something to do with it being an observable or something that was causing it to do weird things. So in this, we're going to say this.seconds is equal to 0 too. The other thing is we only want this timer to display if it's running. So we're going to say root store dot workouts timer dot is running. And if it is, then we can just do a ternary. Otherwise, we're going to return null. Reason why I went with ternary instead of doing double and there is sometimes I've had problems with that with React Native doing the and. So I usually do that. So we should not see the timer right away. I click on this, we now see the timer, and it's started and it's going. The last thing that we can do is we can add a little progress bar if you wanted at the top here that kind of goes as it increments. But before we do that, let me click the clear, make sure that works. Click it again. Nice. Also, if I click this, I want to restart the timer. Nice, that worked. The other thing I wanted to do real quick before we actually do the progress bar is I want to stop the timer if this component gets unmounted. So to do that, I'm going to say use effect. And I only want this to run once. And in the cleanup function here, all I'm going to say is root store dot stop timer or end timer. And I'm just going to go to my thing real quick and rename this. So I'm going to push F2 to stop timer because I constantly keep typing that. That should rename it over here. And F2 did rename it over here for me automatically. Cool. So with the use effect, you'll notice I returned a function. This is the cleanup function, meaning it's only going to be called when this component, I believe, is getting unmounted. So it should stop the timer then. And then I put a brackets here because I only want this to be called at the beginning. Okay, so let's do that progress bar real quick. That should be pretty easy. If we go to our workout timer, basically all we're going to do here is we want to have something that has a width that changes. So here I'm going to say line, it's going to have a height of, let's say, 3. We're not going to set the width. Background color of this, again, let's go pick a color from this. Let's try this brown. See how that looks. And let me think if there's anything else. I don't think that's anything else that needs to go with that. I want to wrap these guys in a view. And then I want to have a view up here. And this view up here is going to be the line. And it's going to sit out on top. So styles.line. So basically at the very top of the component, I want the line, and then I want this stuff inside of it. But I kind of have some flex stuff going on, so I'm going to have to move that down. So I'm going to create a style called row. And what row is going to do is it's going to say justify content, flex direction, and center, all that fun stuff. All right, so we'll put that here. Style, styles.row. All right, I'm just going to see what this looks like. And this is going to be a array because we want to pass in a width. And the width is going to be constantly changing. So I'm just going to set it to 50% right now so we can see what it looks like. All right, press this. All right, so I can kind of see this thing right here. You'll notice how it's getting pushed to the side because we have some padding. So what I want to do, I'm going to say with this view, I'm going to have it flex. So the row here is going to flex 1. And I'm going to move the padding to the bottom to the row. All right, and we'll press this, and now it's right here. Now that's super hard to read, so why don't I pick a different color? Let's try this one, see if that shows up better. If it doesn't, we can just pick white too. All right, that looks way better, cool. And so what's going to happen is we basically just want to compute the percent of the width we should be showing, and we're going to just take that as a property and compute that in our store. So percent is a string, percent, and that's what we're just going to pass in here. All right, so we don't really have a percent yet, so we're going to create that in our store. So I'm going to say root store.workout timer.percent, and then let's go create that percent. So our timer over here, this is going to be another computed property. And I'm going to say percent. And basically what the percent's going to be is I don't want this to be any bigger than 100%. So I'm going to say math dot the smallest number here. The max it can be is I want it to be no bigger than 100. And what's going to happen is I'm going to put a percent sign here at the end because this is just the format of the width. And then here I want to get the current diff. So that's going to be seconds divided by whatever I want the completion to be. So if I want the timer to run out at 3 minutes, I'd put 180 seconds. If I wanted like 5 minutes, I would put, 5 times 60, 300. All right, so if we take a look at that, we should be able to see a little timer that will increment. I don't see anything, so I wonder if I messed something up. I'm going to just go over to the percent and console log it and see what the value is. So console.log the percent and see what we're getting. Because basically what we want to display is a 0% good, and then it should be incrementally getting bigger. Okay, so it's super small right now. So that's the problem. So I just need to times this times 100. So wrap that in parentheses and say times 100. Give that a save. Click that, and there we go. So as we can see, it's kind of ticking, and we can see the percentages increasing there. We can see we have like a little progress bar going now, so that's pretty neat. And then so basically, all right, I want to do one exercise. It's going to reset the timer, and then it's going to go. And let's say I'm done waiting. I can either just click the X, or I can do that. And the other thing is, when it gets down to 0 and I click it and it goes here, it should clear the timer as well. So let's add that real quick. That's very easy too. That's going to be just, so when it's 0 and we click to make it nothing, we're going to say root store.workout timer.stop. So we could stop the timer by clicking it a couple times and going to 0 and clicking it. Sweet. So anyway, this is pretty nifty. I'm really enjoying Mobx, and I really like just putting these values into Mobx, being able to create these computed values automatically that are automatically changing as everything is changing. And then we can kind of, we basically just created this measure method that just constantly is happening every second that is causing a re-render and changing the time on the screen. And the other cool thing about us using start time is if, for example, we were to persist the state, which we're going to do later, and the user comes back, they're going to see how much elapsed time has happened because we're storing the start time. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.